Okay, so we're going to build your OD33 gearbox. I've already stuffed my bearings inside of the motor bridge. There are two bearings. These are the 11 by 5 by 4 millimeter bearings that are inside of your TRX4 gearbox, or you can just buy spares. So there's two in the motor bridge, and then there's 7 more go in the gearbox, and you should be able to source them all from pulling a TRX4 gearbox apart. So they're in the motor bridge, just push them in. If they don't go in nicely, get some flat nose pliers, just push on the outer bearing races, squash them in. You then want to put that to one side. You have your motor plate, we're going to put that to one side because we're not sorting that out yet. Then you want your casings. Now this one, we push the gears in from this side, the bearings, sorry. This one, push them in this side. So I'm just going to get the bearings. This is one of my own prints. This is done in a carbon fibre PETG. The ones that you'll receive from Shapeways will be a nylon, so they should go together quite easily. And what I'm going to do is push all of my bearings in. So as you can see, I'm just using the flat part of the pliers on the outer bearing race just to make sure that they're flat. There's a little lip inside. Push the bearing until it touches the lip. So just give that a good push, and that should naturally stop. If you do force it through all the way, you can break these lips, but they are a millimeter thick, so they should hold it together. So install all the bearings, so 3 bearings in here, 3 bearings in here. So those bearings pushed in, we're all sorted that way. Now, what you want to do is you want to take a TRX4 Sport gearbox and pull it apart, and then that should give you a load of spares. You will also need some M5 shims. So we've got our spur gear. This is a 45 tooth spur gear, so that's not from the Sport, that's the Traxxas 45 tooth. As you can see, I've pulled the slipper material off and stuck it onto here with a bit of super glue. It just needs to be tight. We've got our friction plates, so we need those, that's pretty standard. And of course the bolt to hold it on, and then the crush washers that help provide a bit of tension. All of this is just absolutely stock. So they go to one side. We've got the spur shaft, we've got the center shaft, we've got the center shaft spacer, and then we've got the output shafts from the transfer case. We've got the 18 tooth gear, the 36 tooth gear, and 2 of the 27 tooth gears. And this is what gives us our overdrive arrangement. So one of the 27s acts as an idler. This one is the input, that's the 18. So you go 18 to 36. That is a 2-to-1 to reduction for your rear output. And then you have your 18 to 27, which I can't remember the exact ratio, but when it all works out, it's about 33% overdrive. We've got a load of M5 shims. You want to get these from eBay. They're just 5mm, 0.1 or 0.2mm thick shims. And then I've got the pins out of the gearbox. And I also seem to have lost a pin, so I'm going to have to look for that last pin. And then a couple of bolts. The bolts that I'm using some 14mm countersunk screws, some 10mm countersunk screws. You need 3 of the 10mm, and you need, just counting up now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of the 14mm, and then your 2 motor bolts. Oh, and there's my final pin. Right. So let's look at our shafts. We've put a pin in the end and then slid this 18 tooth across, and this is our spur shaft. We've taken the middle to create an idler, and I'm just putting a shim on one end where the pin is to stop those from sliding. We then take the longer output shaft and build that with the 27 tooth, and we take the shorter output shaft and build that with the 36 tooth. Okay, now we've built our shafts. we're going to take our casing that has the 4 bearings, and this has a sticky out bit on it. We're going to feed this shaft, this idler shaft in first. We put the idler in first because it just allows us to work out what we're doing. We can trim this down later. We then put our 18 tooth in, and that just meshes up. So there we go. So that meshes nice and smooth. Our 27 tooth with the long shaft points outwards. So that goes through, we just mesh those up. All of these gears have been slightly cleaned and then a bit of lithium grease sprayed on them. And then this 36 tooth, we just get the pin correct. We have that facing outwards. Now you'll notice I've only got a small bit of the shaft on there, but that's fine because it only needs a few mils. Right, now this is built, I'm going to take a load of these shims and just place them on the idler shaft and the 27 tooth front output shaft so that they're the same thickness as this gear. This 36 tooth gear is about 8 mil thick, whereas the others are about 7.5. So I just put a few shims on. It doesn't have to be a lot, just to stop the gears from shunting around too much. Right, then when you've done that, you pop the case on the back and you lead in with the long one first and the short one, and then that is the start of your gearbox. Now we want to close this by taking 3 of these longer bolts, these are the 14 mils, and then screwing them in. There is no specific way that these need to go in, they just need to be long enough to reach. Oops. Get those in. My top one is just printed a bit strange, so I'll just correct that. There we go. Right, so now you notice that mine's clicking ever so slightly. That's because this pin wasn't located correctly. We now have a gearbox. Now it's really important with this motor plate that you use countersunk screws, otherwise the motor is not going to sit flush with it. We now take the motor plate and our gearbox, and we make sure that this spur is pulled all the way in with the pin. So that's pushed all the way in. We take our spacer and pop that on there. And what this does is it's difficult with one hand. The rotation of this shaft as it's in operation, this spacer just means if you've got any cables lying across, they won't get rubbed. Then we slide all of those together. I'll try and stand my phone up. So keeping your finger on that back to stop it from pushing, slide that spur shaft through. Then what we want to do is take our shims and we want to make sure that we won't shunt this shaft back out. So we're going to put the shims on until the shims are the same height as the little ridge that the friction plate material sits on. So I'm putting the shims on. I'll try and get a close-up of this. So those shims are just coming up to that height. The phone's not focusing. So I just need to add a few more and then we'll put the friction plates on. Right, so that's now shimmed. Now the reason for having the shims here is actually the shims can sit inside the gearbox between that gear that my fingers and the bearing that allows you to shift the spur gear forwards and backwards. So it's allowing you a bit of adjustability on your spur gear. So what we do now that they're on, is take the friction plate and pop that on. It's a bit tight with the motor plate in place, so I'm going to have to take that motor plate back off to finish this because I've just forgotten the order. Okay, that's just twisted out the way. So we pop this on, pop this on, then put these crush washers back on. These help provide tension. And then we're going to pop this on, and then you just tighten it up the normal way. So the way that I tighten this up is to just hold one of these locked, and then that allows me to tighten this, because if you don't, then all of this starts to rotate and the gearbox turns. Okay, now we're going to install our motor. So we close up the motor plate and we're going to just do those motor plate screws. So they just go on like that. Now, this whole assembly is designed to rotate on itself. Just bear with me with my wobbly camera. So it opens up completely, so you have access to be able to install your motor. This is where things get a little bit fiddly because of the motor plate. So you have to kind of reach in to get your motor plate bolts in place. So I just use some pliers. Just get that bolt in place. Not always the easiest thing to do. But I've traded off ease of installation for compactness. So yeah, there we go. We have that bolt sticking through. I'm installing this on a Hobbywing Axe 3300 kV. And I need to make sure my sensor wire is pointing in roughly the right direction. There we go. So I also need to put my pinion on at the same time. So I'm just going to capture that bolt, pop my pinion in there and try and capture the pinion in the shaft, and then go back and get that bolted in. Right, there we go. So that's getting bolted in. So the bottom one is a bit of a pain. The top one is a lot easier. The top one you can just sort of reach through. Not the easiest system. I appreciate. It's very different to the Traxxas standard one. Now, I'm going to just get my pinion in the right place. And I didn't check my motor shaft, so I'm just going to check my motor shaft. That is there. Right, and now I can reach into these two holes and adjust the mesh on the motor, just to make sure it's got that nice loose mesh that I like on my trail trucks, because all kinds of crud and stuff is going to get into this spur, so I just want to make sure it's all sorted. Right, that looks fine to me. Yeah, that's quite a loose mesh, but not slipping. Right, I'm just going to make sure that pinion is a bit more rear mounted, because I obviously didn't get it right. So that is going to mount on there and get done up nice and tightly. There we go. Right, that is feeling quite good. Right, what we do now is there are 2 holes in here and 2 holes in here. We line those up, get one of our bolts, put it through the bottom, that holds the bottom together, and the top one should fit through. I just tend to try and squeeze it past the spur. There we go. And that is our entire gearbox completed and installed. What I'm going to do now is lift it over and put it into my scattergun. There are 4 bolts that hold it together. Just a case of finding the right holes and getting the bridge sorted. And once you get all 4 together, in fact, once you get 1 in, the rest go in pretty easily, because they kind of locate each other. Apologies, that wasn't totally on camera. So this is the Scattergun V2 skid. So I'm running the Scattergun V2. Not running a curved third link or anything. It's all relatively standard. The 550 motor fits quite comfortably. I'm going to do drive shafts now. Now, if you're like me and you've put your ESC in the way, drive shafts will be a bit of a pain. But essentially your front drive shaft is there. There's loads of space above it, so this thing can get slammed. I'm going to put my drive shafts on and come back. Right, and there we have it. We have the gearbox installed. Now, bearing in mind I'm running a 3300 axe with a 16 tooth pinion. Let's just see if we can get a smooth start. It's a little bit jumpy. Oh yeah, no, not too bad. Oh, just had a bite of my electric screwdriver, so there we go. I will lift the truck up and spin the throttle and you should be able to see the overdrive working because I've got logos on the tyres. Yeah, this axe motor is a little bit broken, but there we have it. We have overdrive in the front and very, very forward mounted weight on it. So your motor is really far forward, so it gives a really nice press down on the front. And I've built mine pretty low for a trail truck, so skid nearly down at the axle nuts. Now, given that this is a portal truck, that's quite low. Nice flat skid, nothing to get caught up on there, and TRX gears. So they're you've got all the reliability of a TRX gearbox. You've got all the small bearings removed. You're only using the larger bearings, less of them, and 3 of them on the main transfer from the motor. So that's one of the main things. But yeah, a little bit twitchy because it's a trail truck, so it's designed to go a bit fast, but otherwise reasonably standard. Right, well, I hope that's been useful for you. Let me know if you enjoy your gearbox, and if you have any problems, just give me a shout on Shapeways.